Hello everybody, Mark here with your playlist video for the month of February 2018. Now before I start, I should note that this month has been pretty crazy for me with 2 big videos and some real life stuff, and so I haven't had a lot of spare time to dedicate to new indie games, so more than usual, these are going to be very early impressions of games. I've got stuff to say about them, but they're far from complete reviews of games I've finished, which just never happens in the playlist, but still more than usual. Still, I hope you'll find something to take away from what I've got here. And with that being said, let's jump right into it with the first game. So this is called Dandara, and it's a Metroidvania with a really unique control scheme. Your character, Dandara, is essentially stuck to the floor, and the only way to move is to aim at the wall or the ceiling and jump over to it. So it's kind of like VVVV, but you can't walk and you can jump in more directions than just straight up or straight down. So not really like VVVV at all then. Silly Mark. Anyway, this movement stuff actually feels quite good, despite how restrictive it is. The game snaps your aim to different platforms, which makes it quick to zigzag through a corridor, and it's cool to dodge away from an enemy projectile at the last possible moment. There are also a few moments where the scenery shifts and moves under your feet, which affects your options and the way you play. But unfortunately, as far as I've played, Dandara never really does much interesting stuff with the movement mechanic, and I think I know why. So the game is also available on mobile, and while I haven't tried it on my iPhone, I can totally see how the controls would make a lot of sense on a touchscreen. And I actually had this thought a long time ago when I was working at Pocket Gamer. I played mobile platformers and Metroidvanias with their virtual D-pads and buttons, and I thought, man, it would be better to make this with a control scheme that actually works properly on mobile. Like Angry Birds was my idea, a game where you catapult a character around a Metroidvania world. And so I think the Dandara devs had the same idea, but it kind of falls apart in a couple key ways. One is that the underlying game just isn't very interesting. It's a very bog-standard Metroidvania, and in a world of Hollow Knight and Axiom Verge, that's not going to cut it. It has really repetitive rooms. The way the camera swings around in 90-degree chunks makes it tough to get your bearings. It's too non-linear, too quickly, I felt, and instead of getting cool power-ups that let you bypass obstacles like the Morph Ball in Metroid and whatnot, you get essentially keys for locks. So, not the best Metroidvania. The devs also chose to use the Dark Souls death system, where you lose your junk when you die and have to go back to your body to retrieve that stuff, which feels weird in this sort of game. It kind of felt weird in Hollow Knight too, but yeah, not quite the same. Because if I die in a Metroidvania, I sometimes want to maybe explore in a different direction, but the corpse system encourages a sort of dogged war of attrition in a single direction as you keep going back to where you last died. But anyway, the other thing is that the game just doesn't lean into this movement system. It might mean the game makes sense on iPhone, but on Steam it's just a normal game, but with a slightly weird way of moving about. There's just not enough thought put into like, what are the interesting consequences of a game where you can't walk, but can bounce from floor to ceiling? How would that create combat encounters, or platforming challenges, or puzzles that couldn't be possible in a traditional game? Think of something like Celeste, which goes into every possible permutation of the air dash move to really wring every last drop out of that mechanic. Again, maybe there's more of this stuff later into Dandara, but if so, that means the game just makes a very weak first impression. Overall, I found this one to be a disappointment, and while the trailers and the pixel art graphics really got my intrigue, I didn't actually really like the game itself, and I didn't feel a need to play past the first hour or so of the game. Nice music, but otherwise can't give this one a recommendation, I'm afraid. Okay, next up is a quick heads up for Tower 57. So we see a bunch of retro throwbacks on, Steam and Xbox Live and stuff, that go after the same few old games over and over again. You know, Mega Man, Mario, Metroid, Zelda, the same games. You know the drill. So it's just refreshing to see a game that takes on a very different source of inspiration. In this case, it's old Amiga games like the Chaos Engine, and it really captures that style with gorgeous pixel art that accurately matches Amiga games, maybe a little bit more high-res than that, with low-quality voice clips that you kind of remember from those days, and just other things that fill me with nostalgia for my first computer. The game itself is pretty fine. It's a twin-stick shooter where you chew through baddies and find switches and whatnot to open up new areas. There are different characters you can play as, you've got different alternate attacks, there are loads of weapons and items to use, and tricky enemies that fill the screen with projectiles, so it becomes a bit of a bullet hell sometimes, and it's all quite hard. I'd say the game maybe doesn't quite have the same tasty game feel as recent twin stickers like Nuclear Throne and Enter the Gungeon. Enemies take a lot of shots to kill, which stops you having that power trip feeling, and there's not much in the way of screen shake and whatnot. Good particle effects, mind you. The game would probably be more fun in co-op, just like those old Amiga games, but it's not too shabby in solo play either. Not a super strong recommendation for this one from me, it just didn't leave me wanting more after I died, but I like it well enough, and if twin-stick shooters are your thing, then you might enjoy it, so maybe check it out. Next up is Subnautica. So this is a survival, crafting, exploring type game, only this time it's underwater. You basically crash land on a watery alien planet, and so you've got to venture away from your escape pod and start finding food, drinkable water, and stuff to manufacture new items. It's got a pretty typical survival loop. You know, you go out and explore to get stuff, then come back to base to craft stuff, which lets you explore further and get more stuff. Being underwater makes it more complicated, as you'll also want to upgrade your oxygen tank so you can travel deeper and spend longer in underwater caves and whatnot. And this is a pretty compulsive loop, right? You know, you start being able to explore a tiny fraction of the planet, and then later you're building underwater bases, making seacraft, and generally dominating the world you found yourself on, a world that at the start felt kind of scary and intimidating, and now you're an absolute boss. Unfortunately, these loops just don't really work on me at the moment. I kind of mentally fast forward to the end of the game of, you know, where this is all going to lead to and be like, could be cool, but I'm not sure if I want to put in all the hours to actually get there. Maybe I'm just weird. Anyway, something that really makes Subnautica stand out is that it's pretty terrifying. Not just the general fear of drowning and darkness and being underwater and dying, but also the alien monsters that hide in the caves and dart out at you and make weird guttural noises that send a shiver down your spine. It's also pretty easy to pick up and play, unlike some survival games I've tried. The Fabricator makes it really easy to know what you can make and how you're going to make it, and new parts of the game open up at a really gradual pace. At the start, you only need to focus on kitting yourself out and exploring the very nearby locations and things like that, but then later on, just as I think it's just based on time, a few hours pass, you'll start getting things like distress calls, and you can explore the inside of the giant spaceship you crashed on, and so on. Overall, I think this is a pretty great example of a survival game, and so even if it's not really my bag, it's easy to see why people have been crazy about this game while it was in early access, and now it's out for reals. Check it out, Subnautica. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Pipe Push Paradise. So I've been researching some puzzle games this month because that's going to be one of the videos I do in March, is how do you make puzzles, and one of the games I got turned on to is Pipe Push Paradise. So this is quite clearly inspired by Steven Sausage Roll. You've got a semi-open world, you've got tile-based puzzles, it's hard as hell, and so on. But it's also very much its own thing. The goal in each puzzle is to direct water between different areas by pushing pipes around. That's quite tricky in of itself, but then you get angled pipes that actually roll over as you push them, which changes their direction and even their size if it like rolls up onto its end. This adds a whole new wrinkle to proceedings. The game's not quite as tough as Sausage Roll, maybe, but close enough basically that most casual players will run a mile or refund the game after 20 minutes of being impossibly stuck on a single puzzle. But to those who do stick with it, they'll find a very satisfying game with lots of tricky challenges to overcome. So this one kind of went a bit under the radar compared to Sausage Roll. Maybe check it out if you played that game and are demanding more. That's all. That's me. That's me done. I'll try and get some more playtime in over March. Thanks for watching, and I will see you around. Bye, everyone.